mode.
Well, good evening, everyone. Here from Finland. We are on I think it's our 66th Dissipation of Glamour Initiative webinar. And Olivia and Tuija and I welcome you to this ongoing search in which we are reading now the complete book of Glamour, A World Problem, working our way through that, as well as dealing with issues which are very pertinent at the time. I think in a little while I have some suggestions about links and so forth. I'm going to give both Alexandra and Olivia some opportunity to talk about things that they'd like to bring to our attention. And so far what I've been able to do inside the question, rather the handouts area, I've got a completed talk that Alexandra gave, I think, in Geneva, and it's in sound and also written. We're working on this issue of lying, basically, on the question of truth in the public discourse, which is so badly abused at this time. So these two, this document and this recording, I think, should be helpful. And there's also a link that I put into the chat box here. I guess it's it's one of these two links, and I think one link is probably maybe from Olivia, and the other is from Alex. So you may be interested in downloading those, because I think they are pertinent to our subject. We're living in a time when the word fake has taken on a new and rather threatening meaning when it comes to the absorption of the higher truths. And obviously fakery and lying and the contributes to the loss of alignment with reality, and that goes exactly against what we are trying to bring about in human consciousness and apprehension of reality. So I just want to welcome you all here, and very happy you're able to join. I just want you to be aware, too, that rather early in the morning, every other week, I've been doing a Science of Triangles webinar. Now, I realize that early morning time, GMT, kind of favors the people in Australia and New Zealand, and they have been there. But I'd like also to make it possible for you to be there as well. And so I'm talking with our technical group, and we're seeing whether we can have that at a time which is a little more convenient for you in the United States. You know, basically I'm starting the webinar at midnight on the East Coast, and the West Coast is possible, and some people do attend, but I'd like you all to have a greater opportunity, and then also to go to Makara, where these webinars will be posted, because, you know, in a way it's like reading a very important section of esoteric astrology, where the Tibetan deals with various types of entities and their triangular relationships. So it's the whole academic side of the actual much simpler but very deep meditation that we do daily. And it's important to know these things. We just start to move towards the capacity of the Tibetan's mind, and I'll bet in another 3, 4, 5,000 years we'll get there. Just keep reading, thinking, and meditating, and all will be well. Now, I'd just like to have a little alignment here, and then get on with our subject of symbolism in our readings. So here we are in the silence coming together. We are personalities in the process of soul infusion, and of course, we are much more than that. But in our daily life, we live as persons who are receiving energy and control from a higher aspect of our nature. So we're learning how to be filled with this energy of the soul. At one point in his reflections, DK tells us to see a triangle which is of light orange color with its downward pointing apex in our head center, and then the base line is inverted and it's on the mental plane, and the Tibetan is there, and our solar angel is as well there. And that energy, that light orange energy, flows into every one of our personality vehicles, and we are told to, and we can do this in the imagination, to bathe in this light as we would bathe in the sea. And as we become increasingly soul infused, we are able to relate to each other with the energies which are harmonious with those of the soul, with greater light, with greater love and goodwill, and with the greater will to sacrifice on behalf of humanity and in cooperation with hierarchy. We're actually offering ourselves here as a little group that is working to help clarify the rather thick and veiled and cloudy and often gray and steamy atmosphere of the astral plane. So many people have their perception trapped on that level. The greatest plane of illusion, DK tells us, using the word illusion in a larger sense. So, with clarity and with caution, we're going to work on the lack of reality in which so many millions live, and of course we have our own areas of unreality which have to be clarified as we, as the Tibetan says, get clear. It's a task which is very much attended to during the period between the first and second initiations. So we'll just sound an Om, signaling our readiness to work on behalf of this project, this clarification of the astral plane, and really finally a clarification of that combination we call kama manas, which prevents us from thinking with real clarity and detachment. Okay, then we'll get into the book. And Brett, if you'd kindly remind me at some point here, if I seem to be forgetting it, that we have an offer of labor for some energized soul who can read and write and has a certain sense of synthesis that will come. I want to tell you about that. It has to do with the White Magic Project. Okay, now let's do a little reading together. And we are right here at number 66. And I think the thing to do, yeah, I'm going to change the color on this one and try to write in a color that's not so shocking. So our academic reading portion and whatever page we're on, we're early in the book, maybe page, we're really early in the book. And we're studying symbols, and of course, symbols are bridges into higher levels of consciousness. They stand for much more than their own form. They are formal bridges to the formless worlds. Do we need to be involved in the formless worlds? We do. Because, let's see, I'm not sure this will be the best. Let me go over here. Yeah. Our lives are mostly lived on the lower 18 subplanes with occasional input of an inspiring nature from that part of the solar angel or angel of the presence which substands our egoic lotus. But and that's high enough because that's a very great being that has already traveled to Sirius and knows the divine plan. But in terms of our own nature, there are higher aspects as well, and we have to find the ways to become inspired through the bridging process. These are the formless worlds. These, well, they're not really formless, but the kinds of forms that are there are not concrete in the sense of the forms to be found on the lower 21 subplanes and especially on the lower 18 subplanes. We have to bridge into this world where the masters focus their consciousness, because they're masters of the lower worlds, but they are learning a great deal about the triadal worlds, and that's where they do the majority of their work, and it does filter down into our soul. The masters work primarily with the soul nature and the soul consciousness of man. Master DK maybe was unusual because he gave so many personal hints how to handle the personality in the discipleship in the New Age books. So our symbolism is a method of taking us into higher worlds and somehow contacting the energies of these higher worlds so that they can inspire us and animate us and galvanize our energy system into new heights of reception and expressivity. So it's important. Now, we've spent some time in the book talking about ideal states, the intuitive state, illumination, and understanding and love, those good things which come from the higher worlds. And I think that's rather interesting considering we're dealing with a book where the veils and blockages to these higher states are being dealt with in an effective manner. So we see what the ideal state is, and then we descend into the nitty-gritty and try to use what is necessary in terms of consciousness or in terms of destructive power to get these things out of the way so we can experience in an ongoing manner with continuity what is suggested in the very beginning of the book. And I'm sure none of us does that because none of us is a true member of the hierarchy, a real master of the wisdom. So let's go on and we'll take a look at some of these things. In the study of symbols, I would urge upon you the necessity always to put before yourselves the goal of arriving at the underlying concept of the symbol study. What is what really and essentially does it convey? What is the purpose of this symbol? What really does it convey? Towards what does it bridge? We have to kind of know these things, even though there's no one way to interpret any symbol, as any psychologist will be able to tell you. Carl Jung and people like him, Sajoli, maybe a little bit Freud, worked with the dream symbolism, and it was always different in what it conveyed, though there were some standard interpretations regarding the collective unconscious as Jung's research revealed. So this concept that's beneath any symbol that we use, now notice this, will ever be synthetic. And remember that we don't really get into the new esoteric schools of the coming centuries, which are, pretty intensive process unless we have a capacity for synthesis. But we're not going to have a capacity for synthesis unless we have real soul alignment, and beyond that, via the Antikarana, triadal alignment, because the synthetic realms lie in the higher ethers, really. And the soul is a bridge towards those synthetic realms. It will not be detailed and in sections. Okay, I mean, we can break it down that way, and we will, but the intuitive hit about the nature of a symbol is what's important, and then we can deconstruct, as it were, the synthetic presentation of a symbol, the intuitive aspect of it, and get into the concrete mind and look at it that way. But at first, its impression will be an encapsulated synthesis which contains the whole idea all at once. It's very much like a Uranian lightning flash. It will not be detailed and in sections. You may have to arrive at this concept through a study of the detail and through arriving at the significance of various sections and parts of the symbol under consideration. And he has us do this, interestingly enough. When, however, your analysis is completed, when the fifth ray has done its work, you must not rest satisfied until you have summed up. Now, in calculus, we have the sign of summation. Maybe I should do it this way. It would look more that it does. It's a synthetic factor, and it sums up everything that we may have dealt with in a more particular way. So we have to have that kind of symbol of calculus within our consciousness as we sum up all that we have studied in a more particular way. When, however, your analysis is completed, you must not rest satisfied until you have summed up the meaning of the symbol in some synthetic idea, concept, meaning, or name. Now, let's look at those words, because idea pertains to the realm of buddhi and beyond. I think I want to make this a little bit bigger somehow. Let's try font number 14. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. So the idea of idea, if I can put it that way, that which an idea is, pertains to the cosmic ethers and not to the lower 21 subplanes. Now, the world of meaning pertains to our soul nature on the higher mental plane. The factor of concept can be related to the lower mental plane and also in a more exalted manner to the abstract mind. So these words, they do tell us something about different levels of apprehension. And I think it's probably very rare that we really work in the realm of ideas. We have a lot of well-constructed abstract thoughts that others have left us and that perhaps we have worked up for ourselves, because the abstract mind will be the first level of the spiritual triad that we're going to penetrate. By the way, as long as I'm there, allow me a divergence, because when we have our Advancing Seven-Ray seminar at the pre-conference this year, we're going to deal with the factors that are expressed by the spiritual triad, and including the abstract mind. That's what triggered me on that, plus the two rays of the spiritual triad and the two rays of the monads. So for those of you who have, reasonable experience in this field, you might really enjoy getting into the higher aspects of our nature from the ray point of view. All right, so, this is another one of my plugs for that wonderful conference that's coming up, number 32. All of us can be 32nd degree Masons here. 33 looms ahead. And that 32, if you compare that to the life of Jesus or Christ, it was well on the way towards the liberation, and our theme is the great second ray, the Buddha and the Christ, radiant wisdom and all-pervading love. May we be blessed with those qualities, which are already inherent within us. It's just that they have to be accessible. And so often our glamours and our illusions prevent that access. So how do we study symbols? Well, here's the easy way, in a way. Involves the fifth ray. Exoterically, this involves a study of its form as a whole, of its lines, how many and where do they go, and therefore of its numerical significance. We're dealing with basic arithmetic and geometry here, and also the study of its sectional forms, the various forms which comprise the larger forms. A number of pyramids may go to make some larger picture, or in fact that is the case. So we get very concrete. He says, I mean its arrangements, for instance, of cubes, triangles, and stars and their mutual interrelation. We don't have to have a three-dimensional symbol here. This is not necessarily a three-dimensional symbol, but these kinds of geometries can be found in larger symbols. Now, there are many triangles in, let's just say, what's that pentagon doing in the middle of the five-pointed star? Why are there five triangles within the five-pointed star? So we look at the sectional forms. So all of this is very concrete. We are counting, we are naming, we are looking at the arrangement of the different parts and pieces, and that's the exoteric study of the symbol. And I'm sure, if I don't have it in front of me, but if we imagine a five-pointed star in front of us, there is that pentagon, and there are, there's quite a few triangles, actually, if you really look at it. And we count all that up so that nothing escapes us of a concrete nature. We're not worried yet about meaning. Meaning is a soul perspective, and we're not there yet. We're in the concrete mind. So that's the exoteric method, and it's fairly simple to remember that that's what we must do when we are confronted with a symbol, whether it's one of those, platonic solids, of which in our system there are 5, or whether it's a flat two-dimensional symbol. And if it's a nature symbol, well, how many rays does it have when the sun is radiating? Does it radiate 12 rays? Does it radiate 16 rays? All of that is significant. Now, the next way of studying is conceptually, and this involves arriving at its underlying idea. Here the word idea is meant like thought. It's not necessarily that type of being upon the Buddhic plane or beyond, whose time has come and which is a living entity, which is an aspect of the divine plan. The same word, unless you're very tortured and exacting in how you present, can be used to mean different things. So here the underlying idea is not necessarily that which the Buddhic plane would reveal as an entity that is intending to manifest in the concrete worlds. And this must be expressed in its name. It may be expressed in its name. At its meaning, as that emerges, so we're arriving at its meaning, which is context, it's sort of soul context. It's the larger picture and relationships. I will just say meaning involves, to me anyway, meaning involves relationship. So where does it fit within a given context, and what is its value within that context? And at its significance as a whole or in part. Now, there's that word, and generally it's a higher word than meaning, a word which indicates something higher than meaning and pertains to the world, at last, of the spiritual triad. Significance is pointing in a certain direction and seems to have a dynamic participation in the fulfillment of the purpose of the symbol, or the fulfillment of the context in which the symbol is found. So there's a directional aspect to significance. It's not just a sign that kind of indicates a superficial view of the symbol, like turn left, turn right. It's not that. And at its significance as a whole or in part, you should, when doing this, bear in mind that the idea connotes the higher or abstract intent. In other words, we can enter, if we take it far enough, if we take this far enough, we can enter the abstract mind and call what we find an idea, even though it is really a thought form embodying an idea. Okay, so the idea connotes the higher or abstract intellect. And it's even more than that, because, the abstract intellect is a breaking out or a veiling or a clothing of the essential formless idea. Ideas are formless in the concrete sense, but they give shape and form to inchoate substance. that the meaning is that intent expressed, he's going to, give us how he means it here, of the concrete mind. Well, it's more than that, but it is that too. It is more than the concrete mind, but the concrete mind can be included here. It is a mental formulation, and that its significance has more, he's interpreting these words differently than he has at other points of the book, more of an emotional quality, and might be expressed as the type of desire it arouses in you, and let's just say, and motivates you to go in a certain direction towards fulfillment. So we can relate the significance of the spiritual triad to the emotional body if we wish. And that's what I said, how a word is used varies, and we have to study the context of it. So this is one approach to the idea of significance, but it's not the highest approach which he talks about elsewhere. In any case, we want to get the concept of what this symbol may mean. If we look at the sun, it's one of the great symbols. We don't have to say that it's the solar logos necessarily. We can say it represents illumination, the power to warm, the power to animate. These are concrete thoughts about what the sun might indicate. In a more abstract sense, it indicates various levels of identity and how being emerges into energy, the energy of light, the energy of power, and so forth. How you do this is going to be up to you, but, it's going to require, I'll come up with some symbols that we can deal with, and maybe not the very, very complicated symbols for this particular type of class or discussion, but something that will get us going. Okay, esoterically is the third way that we, study symbols. We have been studying them exoterically, conceptually, and now we look at esoterically. This word, well, when I see this, it tells me that this word suggests what's been called the esoteric sense. It is the seventh sense, and the true sixth sense is the mind. But beyond that, esoteric study suggests intuitive realization. So this would, as DK is presenting it here, this would cover the effect of the force or energy upon you and the quality of the vibration it may arouse in you, perhaps in some centers. So one aspect is the study of our energy system in relation to the symbol. I remember in my own case, I noticed an interesting reaction whenever I visualize the color rose, or what I consider to be the color rose. I got this flow of energy, probably points to a pretty strong six-ray nature, and it was a different feeling about it entirely, a different sense of animation than with certain other colors. I actually noticed the change in my energy system, and we would be obliged to subtly take into consideration the change in our energy system when we see the sun, when we see the moon. Look at the astrology, when we see the moon full, when we see the moon in crescent, when we see the moon half full. It has great variability and can mean different things to us, and every planet as well. When we see a circle, when we see a cross, just imagine over the last 2,000 years especially, what the symbol of the cross has aroused in people's energy system. So these symbols are very living things. They are very living things, and they have a powerful effect. Carl Jung called them symbols of transformation, and he used them carefully and had people think about them carefully. Sometimes their own psyche would produce the symbol, and that symbol correlated with what was found in general in the collective unconscious, in the unconscious of all. But sometimes, there would be something unique coming up that pertained only to the individual. If you were to see a tetrahedron, let's say, it has 4 equal sides and they're all triangular. I really should have, like Francis, I should have the picture, but my mind doesn't work that way. Anyway, the tetrahedron, and there was a large diamond of a tetrahedral shape on top of our tetrahedron. What would it suggest? It's one of the Platonic solids. In a high way, would the diamond soul be suggested? That would be one of the interpretations, and possibly would the spirit working through the threefold personality be suggested? Would the monad working through the spiritual triad and founded upon the base of the lower triad be suggested? Many things can be suggested. What effect do they have upon us? So think of the symbols that you have used in your life, why you have used them, and what is suggested to you in terms of your feeling, your change of energy and all that, when in fact they make an impact upon your system. This study, rightly undertaken, would lead to the unfoldment of the intuition, especially when dealing with the esoteric approach and the world of spirit, and world of SG, world of significance, with its consequent manifestation on the physical plane, which is what we want, because intuition is correlated with the emerging second ray soul of our planet and with the great second ray of hierarchy, and the Christ will be bringing the activation, the possibility of activating the intuition to many. So it would lead to the unfoldment of the intuition. Of course, you can get there in a concrete method. It's the old story of the shoemaker and the elves. You know this story. The shoemaker, he was behind in his rent and all that, and he was falling behind, but he would lay out his work for the next day and get all the parts and pieces ready so that he would at last work on making the completed shoe the next day. And when he woke up in the morning, there it was. The shoe had been made. The elves were at work. The elves in this case are the intuition, and you lay up all the parts and the pieces of that form which has to be put together in the right way, and this synthetic faculty that we have does the labor of maybe almost instantaneous construction. So it will manifest on the physical plane as we have studied, illumination, understanding, and love. I've been thinking a lot about that word, understanding, standing under, standing within and yet detached, somehow supporting that which you see, or being the support of all that is registered, etc. In the first instance, the objective of the study of symbolism is to enable the student to sense its quality and to contact that vibrant something which lies behind that aggregate of line, color, and form of which the symbol is composed. And so this is the exoteric approach, but be very particular and count well. And do not let any aspect of the symbol escape your analysis, or at least escape your notice. We've got to add it all up and be very meticulous about what we see. To some types of people, this study is relatively easy. To the majority, I guess we can, number ourselves as among the majority, it is not easy at all. Therefore, or thereby, indicating a lack that must be supplied by the use of those faculties at present dormant. So, what do we say? We must awaken dormant faculties within ourselves. And from the teaching, we trust that they are there, and we do not inhibit their awakening through a lack of faith. Let's just say a lot of faith is needed in all that we do, but it's faith based upon reasonable assessment of what the teacher has given. It's a justified faith, it's not a blind faith. And this is interesting. It is always distasteful to arouse the latent faculties and requires an effort and a determination not to be swayed by personality reactions like, this is too hard, I'm giving up. You know how it goes. So, Jung was very strong on this. When you had the, when you had the intuitive faculty, perhaps your faculty of sensing might be underdeveloped, or vice versa. When you had the thinking faculty as a strong faculty, your faculty of feeling might be underdeveloped. There was always going to be 1 out of 4 underdeveloped faculties, and it wasn't easy to bring it into a condition of parity or of balance with the others. There's all kinds of personality stuff that can come up when we're trying to do something new, and we must simply persist. To many, it's not easily apparent how the penetration into the meaning of a symbol can provide a means whereby the dormant Buddhic or intuitional faculty can be brought into functioning activity. That's what he's promising us, that in fact, if we can really penetrate into a symbol, Buddhi, which I often call the next frontier, or the next frontier is approached, and the Buddhic faculty is eventually awakened. It is a delicate art. This art of symbol reading, of, quote, spiritual reading, as note here says, as our ancient master Patanjali calls it. Obviously, Patanjali was a member of the hierarchy 10,000 years ago, so the Tibetan who just became a master in 1875 can look upon this great individual who wrote the Yoga Sutras as a master, and even as, his master in a certain respect. A delicate art, so, we have to be refined in our vehicles and in our perception, and oftentimes there's some factor of crudeness which prevents real receptivity. Always we have to work with the etheric vehicle to raise the quality of the physical vehicle so things can get through to the physical brain. The power to interpret symbols ever precedes true revelation. Well, obviously he's interested in introducing us or making possible for us the revelation of that which has always been, but which lay undetected. Revelation of that which has always been, but has not been detected. We are surrounded by such things, If you think about what a little animal or something can perceive, and then you compare it to a human being, well, then just take the analogy and try to understand what a solar angel perceives, or a solar angel can take the analogy and try to see what a planetary logos perceives, and on to the solar logos and so forth. So, there are many things shut out, and the revelation is always there, but the instrument won't handle it, and we're trying to make the instrument more receptive. The comprehension of a truth for which a line or a series of lines composing a symbolic form may stand is not all that has to be done. A good memory, of course, we can learn a lot of words and repeat them, but do we actually have the energy and the impact that the words stand for? A good memory may remind you that a series of lines forming a triangle or a series of triangles signify the Trinity, or any series of triplicates within the macrocosmic and microcosmic manifestation, but that activity and accuracy of memory will do naught to awaken the dormant brain cells and call into play the intuition which has to reach the etheric brain and the dense physical brain. So just remembering a lot of words, I speak to you as a person who's always remembered a lot of words, just remembering a lot of words will not bring awakening. And we're interested in awakening our dormant faculties so that we can really directly experience the revelation which always is, but which is hidden from us because of our obtuseness. Well, I think I'm seeing the end in sight. I'll just say a little bit more. It must be remembered, and here becomes evident the value of a certain amount of technical or academic occultism. So, let's say, don't shy away from what the fifth ray can confer upon you. We've all had that ray at one time or another, and it's built up a certain faculty of realization. It's even involved with the atomic quality of realization found upon the fifth plane from the top, of the atomic plane. So a certain amount of, technical or academic occultism, that the plane whereon the intuition manifests and where the intuitional state of consciousness is active is that of the Buddhic or intuitional plane, and as we know, the fourth level of the Buddhic plane. You know that to be the case, and I just go here, but it is so. But just to confirm it, there it is, intuition, fourth level. So even before we can, when we start touching the Buddhic plane, we have to go relatively high in its vibratory powers in order to reach the true intuition. And that means that our antikarana work has to be quite penetrative. When we start the antikarana, we can't expect that the entire revelation of the Buddhic plane is going to come to us. This plane is the higher correspondence of the astral or emotional plane, sort of 4 and 6 there. The plane of sensitive awareness through a felt identification with the object of attention. Now that's really so important in the process of identification. This is really a wonderful form of words here. In a one way, we're talking about what can happen on the astral plane, but in another way, we're talking about what can happen on the Buddhic plane as well, and it's even more sensitive and it's more identificatory, if I can use that word. So he's calling the astral emotional plane the plane of sensitive awareness through a felt identification with the object of attention or attraction. Is there more than a felt identification? And the answer has to be yes. Beyond feeling, there is true identification. And, he would say, Master DK would say, read the 17th chapter of John and see the Christ talking about this in a way which is as high a representation of identification in words as has been produced. It becomes evident, therefore, that if the intuitional faculty is brought into activity through the study of symbols, the student must feel with or be in some way identified with the qualitative nature of the symbol, life, quality, experience, with the nature of that reality which the symbolic form veils. So you've made a kind of penetration through spiritual discernment. You're already into the realm of the soul. Let's just say, to properly perform spiritual reading in its lowest aspect, we have to have the power of spiritual discernment from the third level of the higher mental plane. So it is this aspect of symbolic reading that you are asked to study. Well, there's wonderful stuff in this book, and we're going to do our best over the next 7 years regarding all of DK's material to assimilate it, because the new teaching is coming and we had better prepare, because what the master can give in terms of the new teaching will depend in great measure upon what we have actually assimilated. So this is the end of Dissipation of Glamour number, well, what is the number? Oh, goodness, is it 9 or is it 8? This always happens to me. It's not even there, No, it's not that. It's number 66. That's it. I was thinking of the signs of triangles. Number 66. And we'll be beginning number 67, and we're here on page, I believe, 160. Where are we? Oh, goodness. I don't like to get caught in this kind of thing. Probably, well, we're on page 6. We're on page 6, and we go as far as here, page 7. Is that it? Well, maybe here we are, page 7. Okay. We didn't get very far. But okay, we start on page 6, 6 to 7. And now down here, we're going from page 7 to another page. This is where it all falls apart for me. All right, so, okay, we're at page 9. So from page 7 to page 9, at this rate, 2025 will come and go, and we'll still be on this book. So this is number 66, page 7 to 9. And the next thing we'll do is we will, beginning of doggy, I love that doggy thing, 67, page 9 to whatever. Okay, well, I hope that you've been looking at what has been said, and that maybe now you have some thoughts about the text, and then I'll invite Alex and Olivia to speak about the things that are, I think, on their mind, which have to do with our subject of learning how to work against the father of lies, the proverbial devil, and all of the rearrangements of truth which are going on in relation to the lower mental plane and the astral plane. So, tell me then, are there any things you would like to say, or anything you would like to ask on this subject, or failing that, on the subject of glamour in general, or failing that, on the subject of occultism? Anything that you would like to bring forward at this time? I certainly don't know all the answers, but I'm willing to give it the old college try and suggest some things that may be useful. I see a hand. It's a green hand. Where is that hand? Goodness. Okay, there it is. Okay, so, right. Olivia, did you want to speak to this subject? Go ahead. You can, attend to yourself muted. I'll tell you what, if it's on the other subject about our truth and lie and all of that, we're going to delay the discussion of that slightly. But if it's on this subject, I have you yourself muted at the moment, and now only self-muted. Okay, there you go.
Okay, yes, Michael. It's about, I want to speak about what's in the chat box, but I think we should first see if we have comments on the
Yeah,
what we just had, the reading.
yeah, we maybe do that first to keep it in our minds, and then we'll get on
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that particular work. So I'll get back to you on that,
Okay, good.
and yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Okay, very good.
Uh-huh.
Right. Anybody? Let's see now.
There's
Suzanne. Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
there's Suzanne in the questions.
Okay. Right. Okay. We shall end up grasping it all. Well, it's inevitable. Suzanne was saying, maybe never fear, Michael. Perhaps we shall end up grasping it all intuitively. That is, wow, there's so many different layers of the intuition. What we even start with starts in the realm of the soul, and I'll just kind of point to that if I can do so. So it starts in the realm of the soul, our intuitive grasp, but and that's down here in this little triangle. But eventually it rises to the Buddhic plane. But that's not enough, If there is intuition on the cosmic, physical plane, there is a fourth level of expression on the cosmic astral plane, which is correlated with the intuition. And on it goes on the cosmic mental. And there, the seat of real cosmic intuition, and who, really knows what that is. Maybe I don't know, even does the Christ begin to respond to that? Maybe some of the planetary logoi in taking their initiations begin to respond to that. And this whole thing is just the bottom level of 6 more planes, like pancakes above it. Obviously, it's not like that, and the intuition goes on and on and on, eventually grasping suddenly and directly whatever sphere we are dealing with until the whole universe is again intuitively grasped the way it is for the ultimate being in the universe, which we're calling the logos, the universal logos. Yeah, and so indeed, I have every faith that our intuitive abilities will grow. There are ways of stimulating the intuition, and the building of the Antiquran is certainly one, and basically trusting the receptive process and then examining it. Not everything that comes in is coming from the intuitive plane, but maybe some things are, and he's given us in Meditation 5, in Discipleship of the New Age, a method of directly accessing the intuition. And it has to do with putting up thoughts which we examine and then looking for first responses to those thoughts. So at some point we'll have to look at that as we have in some other groups. It's a very powerful meditation. So I'm confident as you are that the intuition will be developed, and Yvonne is asking here, will there be new books written in 2025 and a new Bailey? Well, that's the question. We don't we don't know about a new Bailey, and we don't know whether Alice Bailey has been born again in the occult sense, not in the Christian sense. That was a long time ago. And whether she will be the amanuensis for Master Decay, though they seem to have a good thing going. Maybe somebody knows, but indeed there will be new books starting from 2025. And when he talks about what's going to be offered around the year 2025, presumably in that year or a little after, it's all about astrology at first. Rather interesting. So it'll be the third offering, and we know that astrology is connected with the third ray, but at the same time, the first ray may be the third in line as well. And I'm not sure, Roswitha, well, we had some really good church fathers, and we had some that distorted the teaching. There were some initiates among the church fathers Origen or Origen, or I don't know how we would pronounce that, but he was certainly an initiate, and so many of his thoughts and the thoughts of those who really knew something were thrown out once the less illumined representatives of the church got together at the Council of Nicaea and basically wrote out incarnation and wrote out emanation and wrote out Gnosticism and declared many things to be heresies. Well, the heretics are back now and maybe are expressing in a more favorable environment some of the deep truths that were closer to the time of the Christ Jesus manifestation. One of the hardest things, and is very necessary, is to take the modern Christian mind, which has been fed on everything that the Catholic Church has become, and the many sects of Protestantism, and the many inhibitions of deep thought, and reacquaint the modern Christian with the presence of reincarnation in early Christianity, and the presence, as it was in Buddhism, of emanation through the Gnostics. And I'm sure that many of the people who find their way into Master DK's work and the work of the hierarchy as presented by Blavatsky and so forth have been Gnostics in the past. Well, in the old days, it wasn't so comfortable to be declared a heretic because Virgo was acting up in a quite negative way, and only certain thoughts were correct and others were punishable by death. So, I'm sure we've all been through that, and the Inquisitions are the latest example. There was an Inquisition of Rome. In Rome, the great opera Tosca was all about that, and that was going on even around 1800. So the desire to put a ring around human thought and say, this is correct and this is not, is a kind of totalitarian tendency which must be resisted. And we'll do our best. Sometimes politically correct thinking can be precisely that. In the eyes of some, it's the only way to think, and yet it shuts out other things which are of great value. So we have our hands full when it comes to resisting the enemies of free thought and free speech. But there's a difference between free thought and free speech and invented reality. If you want to be a novelist or an artist, that's fine. But if you want to talk about facts, there are no alternatives to those facts. And it's almost amazing how certain concepts have appeared lately in those who want to distort reality, which will bring us somewhat into our theme. Are there any other questions about what, or thoughts about what we have been studying today? Does anybody even remember what we have been studying today? Do I even remember what we have been studying today? It's the methods of approaching a symbol, whether exoterically, conceptually, or esoterically, and how all of them are important. The idea of the symbol as a bridge, the idea of the development of the intuition and the receiving energy from the Buddhic plane, and Mercury is very much involved there. It rules the Antakarana in one way, and it also rules the Buddhic plane in one way, along with Jupiter and Neptune. Those are planets which are conducive to our receptivity of subtler things. And the need to be subtle, and not just crude in this. Brett, is that you? Okay, I just...
Yes, Michael has his hand up.
Okay, very good, thank you. I get lost sometimes. All right, and there you go, Michael. Yep.
Hi, Michael. It's
Hi.
nice to be back again.
Great, I'm glad you're here.
I was looking at this little sentence. This power to interpret symbols ever precedes true revelation.
Right.
And, if there is true revelation, does that mean there's untrue revelation? Perhaps there is a sequence in developing this. where we have impressions, and many of us, when we have impressions, consider that as true revelation, where it's just a part of the truth.
Yeah, I think you're right on there, and this gets us into the issue of psychism, which is not the same as intuition. And of course, he tells us how sure the average psychic is of the truth of that which has impressed the psychic's consciousness, and resists very much the idea that psychism is found even in some of the animals, as a certain state. So there are always going to be precursors of the real thing, and in our power of discrimination, we have to learn the difference of those indications. And basically, oftentimes, psychism is very personal. It exalts the ego of the receiver. It somehow shows the receiver to be important, and it deals with not with the whole, not with the plan, but with many trivial instances. We have to be able to recognize those things. So those would not be revelations, really. They would be psychic impressions, and a true revelation is about the whole. It's about the plan, about the larger picture. It may be about one's place in the plan, but it doesn't flatter. It doesn't flatter. The master I was just reading, he just has no time for flattery or commendation. A lot worse is oftentimes encouraged by commendation than by a simple correction. And this is interesting. Yes.
It's also interesting that true revelation to us will be more expansive as we become more inclusive and undergo increasing initiations. So we'll have a true revelation that takes into account where we are on the path at the second initiation, at the third initiation. And as we proceed through that expanding inclusiveness, the revelations will be more true, although, it's just a stage.
More true and less personal, We're entering with the soul the world of trans-personality, and we're entering with the triad the world of impersonality. And even if in some way your role in the divine plan is revealed, it's an impersonal look at that role. It's as Alice Bailey used to say, our job is to be impersonally personal, and personally impersonal. So she tried to strike the balance there. And when that thought form of the Tibetan appeared and did a lot of damage, it was, as I've said before, it was giving good words of mediocre cheer and encouragement, patting people on the back, commending them, doing all that kind of thing. And it wasn't the true picture at all. So revelation has to do with an impersonal perspective, impersonal, but not the kind of impersonality that is the first-rate type, which is just, it can be hardness, rejection, coldness, all that kind of thing in the early days. It's a true impersonality that comes from your exalted perspective in the spiritual triad and beyond.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Okay, are there any, let's see now,
Yes,
I think,
Michael.
yes, Brett. Who else?
We have a couple questions from Yvonne.
Okay, right, I've got it now. Yes, right. Should we bathe in orange light to stimulate this process? Well, this is, Tuija's been giving these meditations on triangles. And at one point, DK says, look, wake up in the morning. You don't even have to get out of bed. Align with me and your solar angel and with your head center and use the orange light. And I'll take care of the rest. So I think it's particularly in relation to the triangle's work. But on the other hand, the triangle is the soul. So, there's all this discussion of what is orange, what is yellow, is the true orange a bit more on the yellow side? And it really has to do, interestingly, with what I would call buddhi manas. Buddhi is yellow, and the concrete mind is orange. And he says it's a light type of orange, maybe more towards yellow. He sometimes says that, and that this will help us make the bridge between the Buddhic plane and the plane of the mind. And orange, interestingly enough, is the complementary color to the blue, which is related to the higher mental plane. So sometimes when you look at the plane of mind, you get orange on the lower part, concrete, and the blue, which is also orange in its own way, on the higher part. So I would say that as we're doing our triangles work, which can set us up for doing this type of work in glamour, that we should take advantage of this orange light, this orange-yellow light, and bathe in it as we would bathe in the waters of the sea. Look, everything of value aspects everything else of value. You know what I mean by that? An aspect is an influential relationship. Like, if I have Mars going in my chart, an aspect of Jupiter will mean one thing, an aspect of Saturn to that Mars will mean another thing. But all of them can be used beneficially by the person who is identified as a soul. Because the old saying is that whereas the personality may love trines and sextiles, the soul loves squares and oppositions and difficult aspects, you see. So we can use anything. And anything that has light can shine a greater light on another factor of our encompassing consciousness. So from light to greater light until finally, we get a great sphere of radiance from connecting all these things. And Master DK is wonderful at that because he's a Mercury in many respects, and he connects all this up for us. Well, we have to do some work. And the light keeps flashing forth intuitively until we get that one big intuitive picture, and it reveals a truth which reason alone cannot reveal. True reason is pure reason is the revealer of this synthesis, which is promoted by Mercury and may be consummated by Jupiter. I'm sorry to have recourse to astrological symbols, but it's part of the way I think. So indeed, we can use this. And I'll tell you what, if you've been able to tune in on Tuija's meditation for triangles, experiment with this. Maybe join us next week if you possibly can. It might be pretty late for you. It might be 12 o'clock midnight on the East Coast, but we'll be having the triangles meditation, and we'll work with that orange light, see how it works for you. Now, next. So thank you, Yvonne. And Ario, birds and animals can be understood as indeed. Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And in the zodiac, we have that to an extent. Of course, birds sometimes indicate the Deva kingdom. And there is something called the Gate of Angels in the sky. And it involves the falling falcon in Sagittarius. It involves the great eagle in Capricorn. And it involves Cygnus, the swan, the bird outside of time and space. Hamsa, the bird outside of time and space. So indeed, right there in the sky, we have that. And in other places, we have Taurus, the bull. We have Cancer, the crab. These are animals, We have Leo, the lion. We have Scorpio, the scorpion. We have Sagittarius, which is both horse and centaur. We have Capricorn, which is goat and unicorn. We have a lot, Aquarius is human and Pisces is a fish. So right there in the zodiac that we pay, I think, quite a bit of attention to are important animal symbols. That's why it's called the zodiac, like a zoo, zodiac. And that will lead us to higher realizations. And certain types of human beings can be looked at as well, and they can be symbols for still higher things. What is the man? What is the angel? What do angels look like? There are angel monads and there are human monads, And the real difference is the vehicle through which these monads manifest. With what's called man, there's a lot of concretion. With what's called deva or angel, there's a lot of elasticity and less concretion and the ability to bridge between this and that. But the consciousness, while different, is monadically similar. Yeah, so animal symbols are very important. Thank you, Ariel. Is there anything else before we get into our little discussion with Olivia and with Alex about this falsification, I called it last time. I think I called it that. Right, well, maybe not, and I think it is time to move on because this has been a little lengthy. So I'll tell you what, Olivia, I'll go to you first, and then I'll go to Alex. And let's see, where am I here? Whoops, there we are. And yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Well, I did want to say something about the link in the chat box, which you can look at later on. So this is an article about how Google, I would say that first, Google, Facebook, and Twitter have amassed huge data profiles on each person who uses them. So, do you use Google, for example? Well, they are using your data as input for increasingly sophisticated algorithms that put you in a filter bubble, kind of an alternative digital universe that controls what you see in their products based upon what their algorithms think you're most likely to click on. And clicking on and staying on their site is their goal, because that makes ad dollars for them the longer people are using their site. So these echo chambers, in effect, distort people's reality. They create a myriad of unintended consequences, such as increasing polarization. And, on their, what they call their unending march to profit more and more from personal information, Google and Facebook have shown little regard for all the negative manipulative consequences of their runaway algorithms. And we know people like President Trump uses Twitter as his main communication, and we know the problems with that. So take a look at the article posted after our meditation, and learn more about this widespread distortion that's going on and that we're working to offset. And we're so glad you're doing so. It all comes back to lead us all from the unreal to the real.
Yeah, thank you, Livy. We are under the third ray, the star source of which is out of alignment in the Great Bear. We're being manipulated by powers which want to keep our consciousness in the lower three worlds and prevent spiritual development. In the last analysis, that is what it comes down to. So when things of this nature come to light, that's already, as the Tibetan says, where light appears, darkness vanishes. And so these things coming to light will help with the overcoming of the manipulation. The first thing is to be aware of it,
Yes, and also how large, how widespread, how it infuses, really. So many of us do use Google as a search engine, and yet all of that can be easily manipulated. So with this awareness, as you say, we can proceed with greater understanding.
Yeah, it's important. I just saw an example of this. I'm amazed. Why do I get all these psychic and new age things on the sidebars of my, Google or whatever I use, Chrome or whatever I use. And Tuija had this kind of Chinese shirt, and normally I don't, pay so much attention to an attractive kind of Chinese garment. And she showed it to me, and I thought it was very nice. And the next thing I know, the next day, that garment is being advertised on my Google. Yeah, I mean, there just must be some sophisticated connection. Okay, you're married, whatever, and there's the exact same garment on my presentation. And I thought, well, that's pretty fast, and that's pretty interesting. So yeah. I'm sure it's going on for many of us. And like you say, where is reality when we're in a bubble of our own desires, you might say? Well, okay. So we have to be, ever more alert and more aware. Absolutely. Good. Thank you, Olivia. And now let's see, Alex, I wanted to make it possible for you to speak. And I have here, pretty much your letter. And the different things that are available, and inside the handouts is your article, and also I believe the audio of your article. So would you like to say something about what attracted your interest here about truth, etc.? You can go if you like.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can indeed, yeah.
Well, I was inspired, hi, and thank you very much for this. I was inspired listening to you all from last week. I had to miss it, so I listened to the recording, and you were speaking about falsification and lies and untruth. Olivia brought this up again. Thank you, Olivia, for bringing it to our attention. And Tuija said, you can smell the truth, to quote her from last week. And yes, maybe we can smell the truth, but most people can't. So it brought to mind, I just wanted to share with everyone that this seminar was held by the World Goodwill people last November in London, New York, and Geneva, and the subject was from the unreal to the real, discerning truth in the information age. And the subject of my talk was, and the truth shall set you free, finding clarity in this complex world. And the whole point was to answer people's questions. How do we find and maintain clarity in this situation, which is getting so intense, so complicated, and in which so many people are lost, and the role that technology has in that as well, and perpetrating that. Now, I wrote this talk in September, and in September, fake news was just new, and now things have moved on so much. And have become so much more complicated. And I was talking to a European audience as well, who may not have known as much about the whole business with fake news and alternative facts. So what I've done here is I have posted the full document with all the footnotes, the whole talk, and I've also posted an audio file. And that's my own audio file, because also I'm just going to send here into the question box a link to, if you go to Lucis Trust, they have along the right-hand side the archives to the talks of all the seminars. And at the very bottom is the one at École Kayla, Geneva, which is this particular talk that I gave I'm speaking of. But the video was very, very poor quality, so if someone wanted to listen to that. But I wanted to share it because obviously a great deal of research, thought, reading, reflection, and meditation went into it, and it brings up a lot to meditate on. I could speak about it for hours, to meditate on it and to consider. And I've enumerated here the main points, starting with Pontius Pilate asking what is truth, and moving on to kind of enumerating what the complexities were at that time last year, which have become ever more complex, and then and talking about propaganda, persuasion, mind manipulation, in fact, media manipulation, and I referred to the importance in a democracy for the electorate to be well informed, and that's a big problem right there. The role of the media and our need for media literacy, and then moving from that, I just talk about how to find clarity, or how I would find clarity, or I have helped my students and my children find clarity, and it's sort of a journey then to what is truth ultimately, and what is ultimately reality. So I hope people have time to read it, or if they know anyone. I've had lots of people ask me, you know, they're going crazy. How do we find clarity? How do we get to the bottom of this? And these are my suggestions from the heart and the soul, as best as I could make them available. So that's up there, and I hope people will share it.
Great. Thank you, Alex. We have, you know, as you see here in our handouts, you can download these things, you know, so, you know, if you're interested, why don't you do that? And otherwise, you know, maybe write Alex at her email if you don't get it here. And here it is, peace4@ymail.com. So that would be the address that you could write her for this, or hopefully you'll be able to download it from what we have here. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Olivia. And let's see, is any other factors going on here? Okay. All right. Well, then, if not, we're going to go into our meditation, and we'll deal with this fakery, this falsification, you know, this inventing of what we call truth, as if we were involved in some kind of unreality show, you might say. And hopefully we will be able to discern truth. You know, this what Tuija has said about you can smell the truth. Of course, that's true. There are a number of illusions. You can hear the truth. You know, my old teacher used to say, "Why is there a crack in the Liberty Bell?" You know, in Philadelphia. And of course, it means the bell cannot ring truly, and you know, because of slavery and other things in our country, the United States, there's been a crack and a falsification of the ring of truth. So almost in any one of the senses, there's some kind of analogy to the way of detecting the truth. The smelling of truth will lead right to the monad. It's interesting. It's the sense of smell that gets you there. And I don't know, you know, but we can think about the taste of truth and the vision of truth, of course, and the touch of truth and the sound of truth. Maybe sound and smell are the two that have been most used, but all of them can be used. Does it ring true? And, you know, something's rotten in the state of Denmark, as it was said in Hamlet, you know, what's going on here. So we can detect what is hidden behind the obvious through the expanded senses. All right. I have a long program here today, but let's get right into this, and we're dealing with the glamour of falsification, or simply lying, and all the motives behind that kind of process, which really it serves, well, you know, Satan may be the solar angels from the Blavatsky point of view, but it's also from a lower point of view, the three vehicles of the personality, the 666, the Mars that's out of control. And all of this falsification serves the satisfaction of the personality vehicles, independent of their use as instruments to bring in the divine plan. And this is going on all around us, you know. So we have to stand steady in our realization of what truth really is, and it begins in the world of thought, even, you know. So we're accountable in the world of thought, not only in the world of speech. All right, let's come together then, all of us here, some 45 of us, I guess. at this present moment. And we'll enter the silence together wherever we may be geographically. We are approaching one state of consciousness together. So we are being welded into one responsive instrument, which can use soul light, the light of reason on the mental plane, and the vital light of the etheric physical vehicle. We can use those three lights to detect and weaken and dissipate and destroy the glamours of the astral plane. We'll deal as we go along over the years, I guess it's going to be years, with illusion, misinterpretation, and so forth. But right now, we're working with glamour per se. We use our protective formula because it's necessary. We have that divine cross that involves the forehead, the middle of the chest, and the eyes. And so we're going to see light. It's a lighted cross and a protective cross. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. You see that cross radiating, and that is individually and for our group protection in an area where certain forces try always to obscure the light. Now, Master Moria has a name for them. He calls them the dark extinguishers. And they exist. But we fortify each other with the light, and the soul, our soul contact, helps us with that. So maintain that light. And in our preparatory stage, we bring the three lights into one. We focus the light of matter, the vital light of etheric physical nature, raising it imaginatively to the level of the reasoning, clear mind. So we know from the mental perspective what's really happening here. We blend those two lights. Then we reach into the world of the soul, and we recognize and try to feel the presence of soul light. And we bring down imaginatively that soul light and fuse it on the mental plane with the two other lights, vitality, mentality, and soul. And the three lights are one for the group and for the individuals in the group. Now we're going to say together, with this image of the three as one, the light is one, and in that light we shall see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. And eventually the light of day, which is the scorpionic intuitive illumination, will shine. Our formula, we say together, and you're on self-mute, so you can say it where you are out loud. Radiance are we, and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. We turn on our searchlight as if it goes out in a group sense, out into the astral plane. All our many beams forming one beam of detection and of necessary destructiveness of the veils. There it is, out on the astral plane, in this world, this very veiled and distorted world as it now stands, the greatest of the planes of illusion, as we are told. Now we want to strengthen our beam with spiritual will. We know that this will is from the monadic plane, the atmic plane, the jewel in the lotus, the synthesis petals, the sacrifice petals, and so forth. The spiritual will is, in a way, the will to good. It's the transposed will of Sanat Kumara and of the planetary logos. And it goes beyond that, of course, but it's enough for us. And we say in this strengthening, visualizing the strengthening with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. We are detecting this tendency to falsify, this tendency to lie, to misrepresent, to create alternative so-called realities and facts, all a fabrication. In the arts you can fabricate, but when you're speaking of reality, there's no room for misrepresenting that which is. So the beam is out there, we are the sponsors of the beam, and there's power and fortification in the beam. So we're going to attack this falsification, this misrepresentation of truth, this sidestepping of reality, this selfish invention of untrue scenarios which emphasize only one point of view and not the other. It's not a balanced presentation. It's a distorted presentation meant to bias the minds that receive it. And so untrained are people that it's been pretty successful, and even intelligent people don't even know when they are presented with manipulative falsities. We take a moment to try to see what it is that can happen if these lies really take over without the counter movement which reveals truth and their falsity. What might happen? And I think we can see that we would be playing right into the evocation of the lower forces and separation and conflict and war and destruction and all that would arise because of the bias, the non-proportional presentation of what passes for truth with those who are not discriminating. So let us then use the words of power. We know what we're trying to dissipate and cast aside and make vanish and essentially destroy. We know the configurations we're trying to destroy. The matter of the astral plane is bound into unwholesome configurations, and we have to destroy that binding power which locks them into forms which are inimical to the expression of the divine plan. So, here we go, working with the words of power and visualizing the light penetrating into the glamour, this glamour of falsification, of lying and so forth, and producing a weakening of this glamour, a coming into truth and a dissipation of the glamours. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of falsification, of lying, of misrepresenting the truth. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting humanity. the power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour, the vitality which holds it together. We're going to continue then to use these words of power and working as individuals and as a group. We will watch the weakening and dissipation of those distortions which misrepresent the way things actually are. So 5 minutes in which we have silence and intensity of purpose. Whilst the work is seen proceeding, we are wielding the banishing energy, like the banishing rituals of magic. We're wielding the power to make these things disappear, fall apart, weaken, and be gone. 5 minutes. Now, this is a really big one, and it has a lot to do with whether humanity can rightly cooperate with the divine plan, because when all the lies and distortions and the misleadings are present, the plan as it is, and as each must enact it, will be blocked or deflected. We need so much balanced viewing of the truth, and we need meditation upon this quality of harmlessness, which we are told, if we really meditate upon it and put it into action, will do more than almost anything to correct our life and make available the higher energies. So we will withdraw our beam to the mental plane. It will get more and more powerful, more and more strengthened by the will, and we will be protected. Be careful always. If you find yourself in a state of exaggeration or bias or emotionalism or whatever, you know that something might be getting through to you which you don't want. So we will come together again in a week's time. But first let us sound the triple ohm to affirm that we have actually contributed to the dissipation of this very sneaky and insidious glamour of falsification, distortion, augmenting bias, misrepresentation, destructive invention. We have done a little something. Tomorrow, on our Ask presentations, we have the Soul of Nations, and one of the things that's happening that we will mention is the Olympic Games, which are occurring in Korea, and there have been some diplomatic overtures which, although the road is long and hard, seem to be moving towards unity, and the tolerance of two factions which have been at war for about 70 years, almost. So we'll be mentioning that and other factors which strengthen countries in which the soul must emerge for a better life within the country and a better contribution on the world scene. And that'll be a broadcast. Tuija will be leading that, and then following on Sunday we have our attracting money, attracting resources for hierarchical purposes, because even the Christ needs resources. We give all we can of our time and energy, but your generosity is greatly appreciated as you offer your tangible support to the University of the Seven Rays and the Moria Federation, and it comes to the Seven Ray Institute as well. So we can continue to offer an expanding program which makes us much more effective esoterically, inwardly, so that the outer changes can take place. So we invite your contributions wholeheartedly and are very grateful when they come, and we certainly invite your presence. Your subjective presence may be the most important thing, but the tangible resources are also needed to keep this kind of work going in a world which is not yet entirely friendly to it. So Olivia, Tuija, and I wish you well, and please join us tomorrow for Ask, and the great, it's an invocation, isn't it? Ask and you shall receive, knock and it shall be opened unto you, seek and you shall find. Let's do our best to invoke the energies that we need to turn things around, using the instruments we have been given, the meditations from DK and triangles and the destiny of nations and the attack on glamour. Well, it's all one piece. It's all one piece. And thank you for being here. We thank you very much, and see you tomorrow at the same time, which is the evening schedule, 5 p.m. GMT. And bye for now. Thank you.